Hey, it's Johara. Welcome back to my channel, to the Witchy Reader. So I am back, like promised, to read a snippet from the sequel to The Curse's Light titled The Witch of Light. I already knew what chapter I wanted to read from this because I just really like this chapter. This was the chapter where my side character Andrea was like, okay, I'm gonna need my own story, and I was like, okay then, fine, I guess I'm gonna write another story for all for you. um, but I mean, I always liked her when I first wrote her, but I think this is the chapter that made me fall in love with her. And because, like I said, she didn't have the biggest role in the first book until near the end when her, Skylar, and Will, uh, after a certain character was kidnapped, her girlfriend, and Andrea, Skylar, and Will had to uh, go and try to rescue her while stopping the villain. Um, so that's when she started getting a bigger role. And then the sequel book, she continued getting a bigger role. I did not think when I first created this book or her character that she would end up having her own sequel, but I'm hoping to get it out sometime this year. So we shall see. But yeah, this is chapter 7 in The Witch of Light titled Woman Up. James sat at his desk in his study. The door was slightly ajar as Sydney walked by. The light was on, and she couldn't help herself but to peek inside. She didn't know what he was doing, but she could tell he was hard at work. When he was like this, she knew all too well not to bother him. Her breathing was harsh as her heart sped up. This was dangerous, and she found she couldn't move. After a few minutes of watching him, she backed away slowly and quietly, turning around, ready to walk in the opposite direction. She bumped into someone. Looking up, she met her father's cold eyes. She looked at the study door and back at the man standing in front of her. She wished nothing more at this moment to be able to be invisible or hide within the shadows of this very dark house. "What do you think you were doing?" James asked. "I was trying to figure out our next move," Sydney replied. James raised an eyebrow. "By spying on me?" Sydney gulped. "Of course not. I was going to talk to you, but you seemed busy, and I figured it best to leave you alone. I'll let you know the next part of our plan when I'm good and ready," James told her. "Got it?" Sydney nodded, putting her head down. "Now go," James ordered. Sydney didn't think twice before scurrying off in a hurry. Will was pacing again while Andrea was tapping, and I'm stopping for a second, just so you know that there will be spoilers for book the end of book 1, probably in this chapter. So if you haven't read book 1, you have been warned. So if you have already read it, then you're free to go. If you haven't finished the book or haven't started it yet, then you should finish that before you watch this video, unless you don't care about spoilers. Will was pacing again while Andrea was tapping her foot impatiently as she sat in one of the chairs. They were both anxious for another update from the doctor, but so far nothing, which made them only worry more. "We should have heard something by now," Will muttered. "Hey, think about it like this," Andrea commented. "If they haven't given us news yet, it means nothing bad could have happened, or they would have informed us. But it also means nothing good could have happened either," Will told her. Andrea rolled her eyes. "I'm trying to bring some positivity since the only optimistic person in this town is fighting for her life." Will chuckled. "I guess you do know how to be optimistic, even if it is only as a substitute." "I've known Skylar my entire life, Will," Andrea told him. "I've picked up a few things over the years." Will nodded. "That's fair." Logan and David returned to the waiting room, holding hands. Will avoided Logan's glare as he kept his eyes trained on his feet as he walked to one spot to another and back again. David led his fiancée to the chairs as they both seated. David wrapped his arms around Logan's shoulders. David leaned into his fiancée's ears, making sure to whisper, "You okay?" Logan let out a deep breath. "Ask me again tomorrow." David nodded and kissed his cheek, rubbing his arm up and down in an attempt to comfort him. Logan wouldn't take his eyes off of Will, and the blonde could feel his burning gaze into his soul. Ignoring it became too hard to do. Will had always thought it best to not confront people. "Hide and it'll go away," is what his parents always told him. But then he ended up in this town and met Skylar. She might be on the shy side of things, but she doesn't hide. She doesn't care what people think. She'll let them say whatever they need to and just shrug and walk away. Eventually, that person gives up. It also doesn't help that Logan gets under his skin. Will finally stopped pacing and turned to face the redhead. "Do you have something to say?" He crossed his arms and he tapped his foot. Logan got to his feet, out of his fiance's arms, and placed his hands on his hips. "Yes, actually." Then just say it, Will told him, but don't give me nasty looks. You did this to her, William, Logan told him. You find me harsh towards my sister, fine, perhaps that's fair, but I raised her, okay? Our mother left us, our father died. For years, the only thing that mattered to me was making sure she turned out right. Then as Skylar got older and started talking about a curse, she says she always had a weird feeling, but she's only now trying to figure this out. I thought it was a coping mechanism or something. I don't know. Logan, Andrea warned. Logan ignored her. You say I should listen to her, believe in her? I do. But a curse? Come on, there's no such thing. Besides, I was trying to protect her good name in the eyes of a very small town. I don't want her to be seen as crazy. Will shook his head, stepping closer to the hot-headed man. She didn't she didn't care, but maybe you shouldn't either. It was my job to protect her, Logan screamed, stepping closer to him. Sighing, David moved his hands through his fair short hair. Skylar's a big girl now, Will screamed back. She no longer needs a father, but a brother. Groaning in annoyance, Andrea put her head in her hands. Will and Logan were now only inches from one another, both of their blood boiling. David was nervous about what would happen next, but Andrea was just annoyed at this point. I have worked my entire life to protect Skylar, Logan told him, and you come and you play in her delusions, the very delusions I've been trying to cure her from for years. Will groaned loudly. She isn't sick, Logan. You did this to her. She needed you. She needed you to believe her and come to James' house to support her and be there for her, but you turned your back on her when she needed you the most. Logan balled his fist and was ready to punch the blond man standing before him. David knew that he couldn't calm his fiancée at this point. He was too angry, and what Will said just threw him over the edge. Andrea, who has had enough at this point, got to her feet. She got in between the boys, pushing them back with force. They both stumbled, but caught themselves. Then she used all her force and pit up a noise as she slapped Logan across the face. He let out a yelp as he fell backwards in David's arms. Then she used all her energy to stomp on Will's foot as hard as she can. Will also let out a yelp as he held onto his foot and jumped up and down a few times on his uninjured one. Will you both stop acting like immature babies who are high on toxic masculinity for 1 second? Andrea asked. Logan rubbed the sore red handprint on his cheek. That was uncalled. Andrea looked like she was a second away from body checking him. Her eyes were wide and unblinking. You could tell she meant business. She had a look on her face that told him not to mess with her. Logan took a shaky step backwards. Andrea, Will commented. Shut it, Will, or swear to God I will make you both black out. Andrea screamed, looking back and forth between them both. Will nodded, not wanting to make her mad anymore. You both are morons and selfish, and one more word out of either of you will make me put both of your heads through the wall and watch you bleed, Andrea exclaimed. Understand? Both of them nodded. David simply crossed his arms and watched the scene play out. Good, Andrea commented. You're both being idiotic morons. We're all on the same side. We are all people that Skylar cares deeply about one way or another. Skylar would want us united. Skylar needs us to be united. We can't fight over whose fault it is, because that won't help her. It's not Will's fault. He was just supporting her and being a good friend to a girl who didn't have any. Logan looked down. And it's not Logan's fault, Andrea added. He was just being an overprotective brother, which isn't a bad thing. If you ask me, it's really sweet. I always wish I had an older brother that loved me half as much as Logan loves Skylar. Will looked down. You both better woman up and be strong because Skylar's dying. That's the truth, Andrea told them. When she wakes up, she'll barely have any strength. She'll need to lean on her loved ones. But the picture I'm seeing before me, none of you have any strength to give her. You guys barely have a leg to stand on. Now, I'm going to go outside and make a few calls so that I can find out what I can about my girlfriend because Skylar got shot trying to save Althea. When I come back in 5 minutes, you better be civil. Andrea walked a few feet away and stopped turning around to face them. Scratch that. You better be more than civil when I come back. You better be almost friends. Andrea spun around, letting her hair sway behind her, and she walked away with confidence. They all watched her walk away with shock, intrigue, and a tad of fear. They were all impressed, yet scared of her at that moment. There was a moment of awkward silence. Note to self, Will muttered, never get on Andrea's bad side again. Logan looked to his fiancée. I admit, I'm scared of her. David chuckled. Everyone is. For someone with social anxiety, she's not afraid to tear you apart if you get on her bad side. Logan nodded. I can see that. We call her a thunderstorm at practice. She may be the only girl on a boys' team, but she's the only one any of us are scared of. Besides, we all know that she could beat all of our butts without breaking a sweat. Logan laughed. Warn me next time, babe. It's better to see it for yourself, David told him. Logan shook his head and kissed him. Skylar ran up the steps of her house. This is a dream sequence. So if you're confused because why she's awake now, she's not. It's in her mind while she's in a coma. Skylar ran up the steps of her house and into her bedroom. Sighing, she moved her hands through her hair. She grabbed her bag of arrows, draping it over her shoulder, and picked up her bow. The bowstring was dusty, so she quickly changed it. Her mother watched her from the doorway. "What are you doing?" Rachel asked. "Preparing," Skylar replied. Rachel raised an eyebrow. Preparing for what?" Skylar sighed. "I'm not an idiot, Mom. I'm a bookworm. I love to read, and I've read a lot of books throughout the years. I'm practically in my head, and if I want to wake up, I'm going to have to finish some inner demons I didn't know I had." Rachel chuckled. "You're smart." "Do you know what I have to face?" Skylar asked. "I've seen a cloaked figure roaming around," Rachel replied, "but this next part you have to do on your own." Skylar was about to object, but then simply nodded. "I know." Rachel kissed her daughter's forehead before disappearing. Skylar wiped away the tear that escaped and prepared herself. A cloaked figure walked past the doorway, getting her attention. Taking in a deep breath, she followed him. Sydney watched as James stared out the window, watching his destruction. He was thrilled with the chaos he had conflicted. The wind was still harsh, the sky still cloudy and dark. Perfectly healthy people were dropping dead in the middle of the street as their souls flew into James, and yet people still didn't realize the supernatural that was happening in this small, not so normal town. With James preoccupied, Sydney snuck through the basement door. Nah. Sydney, I can't speak. Sydney snuck through the basement door and down the creaky steps as she made her way in front of Althea's cell. Althea looked up and locked eyes with her twin. They just stared at one another for a moment. Althea was waiting to see what her sister wanted, while Sydney didn't know what to say. "What are you doing here, Sydney?" Althea asked. "I wanted to make sure you were okay," Sydney replied. "I'm locked in a magic-proof cell," Althea told her. "Of course I'm not okay." Sydney nodded. Althea stood up and walked closer to her. "Tell me why you're really here." Sydney shrugged. I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do. And I'm not playing any games with you." "I don't know, okay? Is that what you wanted to hear?" Althea smirked. "You're unsure about everything." Sydney moved her hair out of her face. "Of course not." Althea raised an eyebrow. "Maybe. I can't do this, Sid." Althea told her. "Can't do what?" Sydney asked. "Keep helping you and trying to persuade you to the side of good," Althea replied. "You have to make your own decisions, and I'm done feeling guilty for what happened when I was a child. You have to form your own path for the direction you plan on taking." "Althea," Sydney commented. "I think you should go," Althea suggested. Sydney nodded. "Fine, I will." The twins stared at one another for a long moment with big, unblinking eyes. Sydney finally turned away and walked back up the creaky stairs. She snuck out of the basement door to make sure her dad didn't catch her. Once gone, Althea let out a breath as she sat down. And Andrea was outside the hospital. The wind was harsh and she was freezing, but she needed some fresh air. She had called all of her contacts, which aren't that many, hoping for some information or news about Althea, but nothing. Placing her phone in her back pocket, she let her tears fall free. Her chest rose and fell in slow motions as she tried to calm herself. There was a lump in her throat. David walked outside and stopped to see her. Andrea never had many friends. She hopes to become close friends with Skylar again. Only close friends, because she's in love with Althea and Skylar's in love with Will, but close as they were when they were young. She thinks her and Will can become friends. But David is her friend. They have hung out several times when not at practice or during a game. He's always nice to her and there for her when she needs someone, though in the past she wasn't good at letting him help her. She's very independent and too much of a feminist to let a man help her, but it's nice to have a friend when you're having a bad day. 1 year ago. This is a long chapter. I didn't remember it was such a long chapter. Oh well. Um, so flashback 1 year ago. Practice was over, and all the players were clearing out. Andrea ran toward her bag, still in uniform, as her dark brown hair swayed behind her in a high ponytail. She was breathing heavy and sweating a lot. She grabbed her water bottle and took a big swig of it. David walked over to her and waved. "Hey!" Andrea smiled back. "Hi. You played good." "Thanks." "How did you do it?" David asked. Andrea took another drink. "Do what?" David took a seat next to her bag. "Play a really great game when you're having a bad day, when you're sad or emotional." "First off, David," Andrea commented, "I don't get emotional." David nodded as he chuckled. "Of course not." "Second of all, why do you think I was having a bad day?" Andrea asked as she took another sip. "I saw you this morning in the cafe," David replied. "You were on the phone and you looked like you might cry." "I don't cry," Andrea informed him. David stepped back, crossing his arms. "Never?" Andrea shook her head. "Never." "Everyone cries. Even you?" "Even me." "Well, I don't." David sighed. "What happened?" Andrea splashed some of her water on him and then smirked. "Nothing happened, Dee. I needed that," David commented, "to feel refreshed." Andrea laughed. "I'm glad I could help." "Look, you don't have to tell me if you don't want to," David told her, "but I'm your friend, and I'm here for you when you're ready to let someone in." David began walking away. "I don't get sad," Andrea told him. "Not really." David looked at her and made his way over to her again. "What?" Andrea took a deep breath. "I only allow myself to even cry when I'm having an anxiety attack. I was having a bad day. to answer your question. When I'm upset or angry, I push it all down and use that energy during practice or games. The anger is shown in my performance. I had a fight with my parents. David sighed. Andrea, they're very strict. I'm their only child, and they always wanted me to be more on the girly side, Andrea explained. And they most definitely want me to be attracted to boys and not girls. That's why they don't know my sexual orientation yet. But you dated Skylar Prescott for a good 5 years. Yeah, I know. But they never knew. We kept our relationship and true feelings for each other hidden from them. They're very Catholic, you see, and would not be okay. I've been hanging out with Althea a lot lately, and I care about her. We almost kissed when my parents caught us. David shook his head. Oh, Andrea. Now they're mad at me for having an intimate relationship with another woman. And Althea's mad at me because I told her I cannot see her anymore as a friend or anything else, Andrea explained. But I don't want to see her, but I don't want to not see her, and I hate having to pretend to be someone I'm not. My parents won't want me to be exactly like them, but I'm not. I don't know what to do, David. Andrea, let me tell you something. I wasn't ready to come out when I did. I was forced, kind of like you, David told her. My parents didn't accept at first, but with time they did because I was their child and they loved me. Even when I was fighting with them because of who I was happier. I felt free, and I didn't have to hide who I was. If your parents don't come around, then that's their issue. Your only job is to be yourself. Do whatever makes you happy, not them. Andrea smiled. Thank you. She leaned in and gave him a hug. He smiled as he returned the hug. Now back to present day. Andrea sniffed and wiped a tear away as it began to fall from her eye. Her mind always raced. It could never just be silent and let her think. Right now, Andrea was very worried about Skylar and Althea. Skylar was fighting for her life, and Althea was still kidnapped and probably all alone. Andrea just wanted to know she's okay and be there for her, but she can't. And she can't be there for Skylar because it was up to Skylar now if she's going to live through the night. David walked up next to her, stayed silent, and looked at the dark sky like she was. Andrea looked over at him, but he stayed silent, gazing at the sky. She moved her hair out of her face and tried her best to ignore the wind. What are you doing, David? Andrea asked. I came to check on you, David replied. He finally looked at her. I was worried. Sighing, Andrea looked back at the sky. You don't have to. Yes, I do. That's what friends are for. I haven't spoken to my parents for almost a year, Andrea told him. I know. My ex-girlfriend and childhood best friend is fighting for her life. David nodded. Andrea moved her hand through her hair, and my current girlfriend has been kidnapped and could be dead for all I know. Don't think like that. Why shouldn't I, David? Andrea asked, finally turned to face him. Everyone is falling apart. The world is falling apart. Skylar is the one who is positive and optimistic, not me, but everyone is at each other's throats and blaming one another. I'm trying to be like Skylar, but I can't. I couldn't 10 years ago, and I can now. You done? David asked. No, Andrea replied. It shouldn't have to be all rely on me to be the middle woman trying to get everyone to get along, and now I know how Sky feels. Now I'm done. David nodded. You're right. It shouldn't be all on you. It shouldn't have to be all on Skylar either. Everyone should have to make an effort. Andrea looked down. Skylar has the world on her shoulders, David explained, because she's the chosen one, because everyone around her is pessimistic, because she's stuck in the middle, because she feels like it's her job to make everyone get along, to be okay. It's to the point that she doesn't know how to take care of herself because she's too busy worrying about everyone around her. Looking up, Andrea met his gaze, but maybe it wouldn't have gone that bad if all of us could have just lifted part of that weight off of her. David continued, we can all share it. Skylar's fault is that she doesn't realize that just because she is chosen doesn't mean she has to do it all by herself. Don't make the same mistake she did. There was a moment of silence. They both stared at one another with intensity. Andrea moved a lock of hair behind her ear and nodded, wiping away a loose tear. She was about to speak when lightning shot down in front of them. They both screamed as they were flown backwards. And that is the end of the chapter. It was longer than I remembered. But yeah. Like I said, it's one of my favorite chapters that I wrote. I absolutely love the scene when Andrea goes off on Will and Logan. It was a lot of fun to write. So yeah. Please like and subscribe, and I'll talk to you guys next time.